when they split his epidermis, they bore witness to the frozen liquid gold that once flowed freely like the teachings in Timbuktu. They found poems tattooed to his deteriorating bones in lyrics gestating in the pools of his intestines. He had talent. But the only performance he was a part of was an autopsy. No one ever expected him to, so he didn't succeed. He knew the answers. He just never raised his hand. And he did his homework. He just never turned it in. See, he had the ability, but his skin was a little too dark for anyone else to see his inner shine. He had rhymes that'd take you to a whole other dimension. Hit you so hard you'd be collecting poetic pensions, had bars, and hadn't ever even seen a prison. See, buried deep within him were glowing embers. Buried deep within him was a raging flame, but we mistook it as glowing embers, so it took fire to match that fire, and sprawled out in the street was where he lay. But with spoken word, he can be resurrected. See, through this poetry, he has a voice. This isn't just art. It's pain. Our passport to brighter days, raw emotion flowing through our veins. See, this isn't just spit. It's vomit. Visceral sensations bubbling to the surface, exiting in syllables so sinister they'd make Satan quiver. See, this is what you call a beautiful disaster. It's not just potent poetry. See, this is our success story. And for the past 5 years, I've had the privilege of working with education officials to aid inner city youth in creating their success stories. So this all started back in 2009. I sat at a table with a bunch of just some superintendents from Twin Rivers School District and members who were working for the Crest Center in the UC Davis School of Education, who wanted to bring Youth Speaks, which is a national spoken word program, to Sacramento. So what Youth Speaks does traditionally is they give youth this platform to express their voices in an attempt to get them to enact some sort of social change with it all. The reason why the Sacramento chapter is so unique is it's one of 2 in the whole country that are based out of a school of education, which means it operates at a very unique junction between art and education. And so that is kind of where my niche has been. It's been amazing. And one of my favorite parts has been professional development. So teacher trainings, right? We get to them and they're like, I want to engage my students, but how do I do it, right? So we're saying when you're teaching in these inner city schools, right? We say, why don't you bring in something that's culturally relevant? Why don't you bring in hip hop or other elements of urban culture into your curriculum? And teachers say, yeah, that's cool, but I've got all these standards here that I've got to meet. So how's that actually going to happen? So what I love most about being able to do professional development is I get to give teachers something that they can actually take back to their classrooms and use. So we'll sit with a teacher and say, okay, you want to teach your kids figurative language, right? They need to learn what alliteration is, what an extended metaphor is. How about we dissect Tupac's Rose That Grew From Concrete? How about we look at Lupe Fiasco's Hip Hop Chick Saved My Life? How about we look at that and find all of the metaphors? How about we look at that and find the alliteration and see what can happen in your classroom then? So that's kind of what I've done. I've spent some summers working with teachers, helping them create those kinds of lesson plans, as well as hosting open mics for kind of the general Youth Speaks thing. And mainly my role has been in North Sacramento, Del Paso Heights area, but I've also done a bit 21st and Broadway, Microphone Mondays. The Soul Collective does that every week. So it's kind of the meeting point for young poets from all around Sacramento to come use those voices, enact social change in kind of the traditional manner, as well as just kind of general performances, getting other people aware of and invested in the power that spoken word can have in these communities. So I've gone from the former chancellor of UC Davis to the Harvard School of Education to the Crocker Art Museum, kind of touring and just talking about how much of an impact this can have in terms of art as well as in terms of education. So the kind of crown jewel of SAYS, or Sacramento Area Youth Speaks, is the May Summit. At the end of every school year, we challenge all of the principals, all of the teachers, all of the school administrators. We say, give us the kids who you can't reach. Give us the kids who can't sit in your class for 15 minutes. We'll take them from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., and we promise to keep them engaged in something that's academically meaningful the whole time. And it happens, and it's beautiful, and it's the most vibrant exchange of energies that I've ever participated in. So what happens is they get there, there's music, there's drums, there's inspirational speeches, they move from college workshops to writing workshops. There's a graffiti battle that kind of happens in the middle of the day, which the first slide was a product of the 2011 summit. There's also rap battles at lunchtime. There's dance battles at lunchtime. And everybody kind of gets these creative juices flowing, and then it all culminates in the end of the evening slam. So a slam, a poetry slam, is different from just spoken word, right? It's not just getting up here and sharing you my story. It's not an open mic. A poetry slam is a poetic competition of sorts. You want to have a title at the end of that, right? So Sacramento has been having youth poetry slams since 2009. The very first one was at UC Davis. There were about 300 youth. The next one was also at UC Davis, Mondavi Center. We had about 800 youth that year. And it's just kind of grown exponentially since then. And so in 2009, I was named the first Sacramento Slam champion. 2010, things started to change a little bit. And along with the slam, we were able to name the members of the Sacramento Slam team who would go on to compete internationally at Brave New Voices, which is basically Youth Speaks at an international level. So I was on the first Brave New Voices team out of Sacramento. We did amazingly well. After spending a summer just workshopping, critiquing each other's just deepest feelings, changing our poetry in ways that we could never have imagined. We took that, we went to Los Angeles. It was the city that it was being held in that year. We made it past quarterfinals, fine, got to semis, 0.2 away from that final stage, but we got 5th internationally, and it was beautiful. And since then, I've come back to coach subsequent teams, as well as host some of the writing workshops that are featured at the SAYS Summit that I was a participant of in 2009 and 2010 when I was still in high school. So I grew up, right? I left Sacramento. I had to go to the University of Southern California. I was in Los Angeles. I'm like, oh no! Where are all these amazing Sacramentans? Where's the poetry? So I sat around freshman year and kind of twiddled my thumbs angrily, but by the beginning of my sophomore year, I had created a spoken word collective at USC because there was a need for it. There was such a need for it. In a neighborhood such as South Los Angeles that is so deprived and so in need of something like this. Situated in that neighborhood was USC, this oasis of knowledge. And my mission with Loaded Language was to simply bridge two communities and to have some kind of exchange between our interpretations of reality. And what better way to do that than artistically, which was really the only way I knew how to do that. So we had monthly open mics, which were the Nook. We had high school students come out, we had USC students come out, we had singers, we had poets, we had musicians, we had dancers. We had people just get up and talk. And it was amazing. So that was great. We did community writing workshops at a place called the Co-op. Sometimes we would sit around a fire and just kind of write. Sometimes we would sit on the porch. Sometimes people would write things there or bring things that they just wanted feedback on. But it was a great chance to just bring people together. And so kind of moving into the next year, we'd like to put on an actual showcase at USC to show them just how much of an impact these kinds of programs should have. So at present, I'm working on another meeting point between education and spoken word and art. Which is using spoken word to actually document the success story of the 2011 California Teacher of the Year, Kadir Rajagopal, at Grant Union High School, which is the school that I graduated from. He implemented this, he created the CREATE instructional model. created an academy at Grant Union High School based off of that instructional model, which among other things features culturally relevant teaching, as well as teacher accountability strategies that just aren't really present in our current high school system. And so what he's done, amazingly, is effectively closed the income and racial achievement gap with his students. And so we're creating a documentary to be able to document that, as well as provide a resource for other teachers in terms of how can we make this happen? How can we actively implement this instructional model without money, without a policy change, without anything else, with what we have right here, which are amazing teachers. In closing, research shows that music and art not only improve cognitive processes, but also promote social development and self-esteem, especially valuable for underserved youth. So when we think about the pivotal role that art plays in our lives, right? When we think about the way that it can transport us to other places, make us think about issues in a different way. When we think about the value that that has for an individual who deeply believes that interlocking systems of oppression are acting upon him to make failure seem inevitable and success seem like something that comes to everyone else, we think about the power of creativity, the power that art has for us to reimagine ourselves in a different place. And it's invaluable. It is absolutely invaluable. When we think about it in that moment is when we can truly see how powerful, how pivotal, and how loaded language truly is. Thank you. So one of the things that I guess I neglected to mention about SES is it actually has a residency program in which it trains community members to be poet mentors, to then go into high school and middle school classrooms in Sacramento and work with teachers to do the professional development that I used to do over the summer every day in their classrooms. So it's happening, and again, the funding is dwindling. It's a really difficult thing to do on a large scale, but because of places like the UC Davis School of Education, because of certain grants that they've been given, they're able to at least start it, to create some kind of beacon of hope in terms of urban education, to then provide the blueprint for it to happen in other places. So yeah, it's small now, and I truly believe that it will expand, that it can expand. It definitely has the potential to infiltrate many, many other classrooms because the power is transformative and the need is definitely there. So, in terms of cultural barriers between teachers who may have come from a completely different background than the students that they're interacting with. So the thing about the SES professional development workshops is it doesn't ever encourage teachers to be anything other than who they already are, but it encourages them to interact with the students as they are as well. So if you're a teacher who comes from a completely different background, what we encourage is really for you to get to know your students better. For you to say, okay, what do you listen to? Let me listen to that song, or let me try that artist out, or oh, what? Maybe I'm not completely tuned off to graffiti, and maybe I can possibly see how it could be an art. Or what was that joke or that comedian who you were just telling? How can I, put some kind of joke into my lecture? It's not necessarily changing who you are fundamentally as an instructor or as a person. It's merely encouraging you to actually have something that's culturally relevant to the individuals that you're teaching, because it's an exchange, right? And it's just kind of encouraging that type of exchange. So to a teacher who's not necessarily in the same shoes as the students that they're teaching, I would merely say just get to know the students that you're interacting with. Just hand out a piece of paper at the beginning of the year in each of your classes and say, who's your favorite artist? What comedian do you like? And maybe take a little bit of time to indulge in that, to figure out what it is that they do like.